What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports. You're watching our college football channel, and I'm going to give you my updated projections for what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to do tomorrow night, what I think the new playoff rankings are going to look like. I will also give you my top 25 poll, which is a little bit different than how we've done it in the past. If you watched last week, you'll know what I'm talking about. But what we learned, I think, from the playoff committee from this past week is that they're not going to penalize teams for playing fewer games. They're simply going to evaluate the games that they have seen, and they're going to say, how have you done in those games? Also, close losses, I think that's something that really stood out to me. Teams that lost a really close game didn't really get penalized much for losing that close game. For example, Clemson losing a close game to Notre Dame, yet still being ahead of Ohio State, which players being out was another big part of that one, so that's maybe not a perfect example, but other things like that. Iowa lost a couple of close games. They were ranked, even though they've only played 5 games and they're 3-2, or they were 3-2 last week. They were still ranked because Iowa's a perfect example of what the committee is doing this year. They're looking at the games that you've played, whether it's 5, whether it's 10. How did you play in those games? And they're also looking at how did you lose? Did you lose a close game? Iowa, both of their losses were close. They were good teams, pretty good teams. I guess I would say, one of them was good in losing to Northwestern. So that's something that I think we learned, and I'm going to try to apply everything that we saw last week. In the past, if you follow this channel, I'm usually very accurate in these projections. I think I got a lot of things right in those first rankings that other people did not get right, like BYU. I did not have them in the top 10. I think I was only off by 1 spot with BYU. There were things I got wrong for sure, but I think now that we actually have a ranking out and we know how the committee's kind of thinking, especially when it comes to the Big Ten and the Pac-12, I think it will make it easier. Now, obviously, we never really know what they're going to do. There's been years in the past where it seems like they're looking at one thing and then the next week it changes, and then it seems like they're looking at something else. There's been a lot of inconsistency, but based off of what we saw last week, I'm going to do my best to project that. But first, let's look at my top 25, and it's different this week, and it was different last week. I'm simply ranking these teams based on who I think would win on a neutral field if they played at full strength this week. That's how I'm ranking these teams. Not looking at resume, not looking at wins and losses. It's a little bit different, but a couple people complained about this top 25. Some people liked it, but some people didn't. And what I have to say to that is, if I did a top 25 poll like I normally do, it would be very similar to my playoff projections. That's why I'm going this route. I tend to agree for the most part with the playoff committee. As far as how I would rank these teams in a normal top 25, there would be some differences there. I'd have BYU a little bit higher and some things like that. But for the most part, it's going to look very similar to the playoff rankings. So I wanted to do something a little bit different, and that's what I'm going to continue to do the rest of the season. So this is how I would rank the teams again. Playing on a neutral field at full strength this week, who would I take? I take Alabama over anyone else in the country. I would take Clemson over Notre Dame, but I tell you what, the way Notre Dame played against North Carolina, it makes me think, have another thought about this game, because I think Notre Dame could potentially beat Clemson in that rematch. The defense and just the physicality, the offensive and defensive lines for Notre Dame, so impressive. I don't know. That's a tough game. I think it's going to be a good one. And I think because of that, Notre Dame is a lock for the college football playoff. I would have Florida at number 4, Texas A&M number 5. Not really impressed with A&M last week, but they were coming off of a long stretch of no game, so they hadn't had a game in like 3 weeks or whatever. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a break there, and I have Ohio State at number 6. I kind of think Ohio State would beat Florida and Texas A&M, but I just haven't seen enough on the field to where I can definitively say that. I've seen Florida at times look great, like a team that could maybe knock off Alabama. Same thing with Texas A&M. I've seen Ohio State look really good at times, but I just don't know if I've seen that greatness yet out of the Buckeyes. And they've only played a few games, so it's hard for me to put Ohio State over Florida or Texas A&M. If they played this week, I would probably go with the Gators or the Aggies, but it's very close. I was very close to putting Ohio State at number 4 just because Florida and A&M didn't look great this last week, really Florida the last 2 weeks they've started kind of slow. They finished strong, but that's a close one. And if you want to put Ohio State number 4, if you think they would beat those two teams, I would definitely be okay with that. I have Oklahoma number 7. I think this is one of the hottest teams in college football. Wish they could have played this past Saturday, but they're just playing on a different level right now. And so is Georgia. Georgia's kind of weird because 2 weeks ago, the passing game with JT Daniels looked unbelievable. And then this past Saturday, JT Daniels didn't look all that great, but they were able to run the football. If they ever put it all together offensively with the defense that they have, Georgia could maybe be the best team in the country this year, believe it or not. They've got the talent to do it. They're just not putting it all together, and that's why I have them behind Oklahoma. But I still think Georgia would beat almost anyone. BYU at number 9. I think BYU would beat Cincinnati. I think this team is just a little bit more complete. They're more physical at the line of scrimmage. It would be a great game, but I think BYU would actually beat Cincinnati. I have them at 9, Cincinnati at 10. Then I have Miami, Indiana, Iowa State, Wisconsin, USC, Northwestern, Texas, Oklahoma State, Oregon, and Coastal Carolina 11 through 20. I know Northwestern just beat Wisconsin, but I think if they played this week on a neutral field, Wisconsin would win. I think if they played again at Northwestern, Wisconsin would win. I just think the turnovers really hurt them. I think the Badgers are just a little bit better than Northwestern. I know you're going to say, well, how come they didn't win that game? Well, the best team doesn't always win. Upsets happen. And we saw with Northwestern against Michigan State, this team is not a team that's just going to go out and beat teams that aren't great. They're not just going to be able to show up and win games. They're going to have to play their A game. And we've seen that because they've had some close games already this season. It's not like they're blowing everyone out. So yeah, Northwestern for me is a good team, but I don't think they would beat Wisconsin. And I think USC would actually beat them because of their offense. But Miami, Indiana, good football teams. Iowa State's playing really, really good right now. They've got Texas at 17. I know they have 3 losses, but they've been in every game that they've played. All of their losses were really close. Oklahoma State, that's a close one for me. Oklahoma State, I know they lost to Texas. I kind of think Oklahoma State would win that game if they played again. But they haven't been playing great either, so I'm going to keep Texas ahead of them. Oregon at 19. I know they had a bad game, rivalry game against Oregon State. But I still think this is a good football team. Coastal Carolina, I think, would actually beat North Carolina or Auburn or Washington. I think this team is that good. I know a lot of people think they're overrated, but Coastal Carolina is a good team, and they got a really good quarterback. I would like them in those 2 matchups. I think North Carolina defensively played a lot better against Notre Dame. Offense, though, couldn't get it done against a really good defense. But this is still a good team. Auburn at number 22. This team is not playing great right now. I mean, it's just been a lot of inconsistency from the Tigers. But you go to the Iron Bowl, and they were blown out, really never competitive in this game. I don't think Auburn is a 30-point. It's 30 points behind Alabama. I think if they play their best game, Auburn could keep it within 14 to 17 points or whatever. I still think it's a pretty good team. But they're not a team that's going to knock off a top 10 team. I think we've seen that this year. Washington is playing pretty good. They're undefeated. I like their defense. I think they're getting better. And it's a team that I think could beat most teams in the Pac-12. It's going to be a really good game between Oregon and Washington, but I would still take Oregon right now. Tulsa at number 24, a team that just comes back in the fourth quarter pretty much every game. And then we have West Virginia, a 3-loss team, but still a very good team. And I think they're going to give Oklahoma a really good game. Looking forward to that one. Also, honorable mention, we got Iowa, Boston College, Marshall, NC State, Liberty, Buffalo. Buffalo's playing really well right now. Watch out for this team. They may go undefeated in the MAC. Now, Iowa is a team that I know they're ranked in the playoff rankings and everything, but there's something missing from Iowa. They're just not quite, I don't know what it is, but I watch this team and they're just not quite there yet for me to be a top 25 team. But they're going to fight and they're going to keep games close. I think Tulsa or West Virginia would beat Iowa, so that's what it comes down to. So that's how I did my top 25. Let's get into the playoff projections now. This is how I think the committee would rank these teams. I've got Oregon at number 25. I think the committee is going to give them the benefit of the doubt. It was a very tough rivalry game on the road. It came down to the wire. It was a close loss, and we've already seen that the committee is not penalizing teams for losing close games. So I think Oregon stays just in the top 25. Louisiana should have been in last week. I have no idea why they were not. Not sure what the committee's deal is with Louisiana. They beat Iowa State, who is now maybe a top 10 team. Their one loss came to a top 25 team in Coastal Carolina. I know they've had some close games, and again, the committee seems to really be looking at that when, if you look at their criteria, margin of victory is not supposed to be something that they look at, but it is clear they're looking at that this year. Or maybe it's just the game control and all the analytics they have, all of that stuff, the metrics they use. I really don't know. I wish we could see what all the things that they use there, but they've got to be in the top 25 this week. I mean, Iowa State continues to get better. Coastal Carolina is still undefeated. It's really ridiculous that they were not in the top 25 last week. I have no explanation for it. I think Washington's probably just ahead of them at 3-0 at number 23. They're undefeated. We saw them with USC and Oregon. We saw them rank both of those teams without having a great win and without looking all that impressive, but they were undefeated in the Pac-12, so I think Washington probably gets in there. Tulsa at number 22. They are 5-1. Going to have a big game with Cincinnati coming up. And then Iowa there at number 21. I don't think we see much movement. They got the win over Nebraska. It wasn't pretty, but a rivalry game. It was a hard-fought win, and I don't think the committee's view of Iowa is really going to change much from that game. Let's go to 16 through 20. I've got Oklahoma State at number 20. Not all that impressive against Texas Tech. They were able to kind of pull away, though, and get the win. And I know Texas has 3 losses, but again, if you look at how the committee has viewed these teams this year, they've looked at those losses and how did the teams lose. Texas has 3 really close losses. I know the TCU loss is a bad one, but they go to overtime and lose to Oklahoma. They lose in the last minutes to Iowa State, who is now, again, maybe a top 10 team. I think the committee's probably going to keep Texas up here pretty high. Plus, they have the head-to-head over Oklahoma State. The committee has also, I think, viewed the head-to-head pretty strongly this year. So I think Texas will actually stay at number 19. Could be wrong, but based off of what we saw last week, I think that's what the committee's going to do. Coastal Carolina and Marshall both undefeated at 17 and 18, just kind of hanging out there. And then USC at number 16. Hopefully we get to see them play this week because their game got canceled. And that was a big one, too, playing Colorado, 2 undefeated teams. But USC, I think, again, not much movement there either. We go to 11 through 15. I think Wisconsin there at number 15. I've got BYU still at number 14 at 9-0. Northwestern looks like we forgot to update their record there. They're not 6-2. They are 4-1, I believe. I think they're still ahead of BYU, though, because they've got that top 25 win over Iowa, and they lost a very close game to Michigan State. The committee, again, seems to be not penalizing teams if they lose in really close games, and that's a perfect example here. Northwestern, they played a pretty tough schedule so far. They've got that signature win, I guess you would say, over Iowa. Well, Wisconsin, obviously, an even bigger win. So you've got 2 top 25 wins and a close loss. I think Northwestern still actually stays ahead of BYU. And again, I just forgot to change their record. Northwestern is 4-1, I believe. I know it's just the one loss. I don't think they've had any games postponed. So 4-1 for Northwestern. I apologize for the error there on the graphic. But Indiana at number 12, good football team. Really impressed with them against Maryland. A little bit of a slow start, but they took care of business in the second half. And again, look like a team that's going to help Ohio State. They need Indiana to win out and look good doing it. And then Ohio State needs to win out. And I think that's going to get Ohio State into the college football playoff. Oklahoma at number 11 at 6-2 didn't play. I don't think we see much movement from the Sooners, but I do think we have a Big 12 team that's past Oklahoma now, and that's Iowa State. I think Iowa State jumps Oklahoma after a big win over Texas. Another big win on the resume. You've got to win over Oklahoma and Texas. The Louisiana loss hurts, but obviously it doesn't hurt that much because the committee had Iowa State ranked pretty high last week. So I got the Cyclones up to number 10. I think they, with that win over Texas, would have to go ahead of Oklahoma. They beat them head-to-head. So, yes, I think we see the Cyclones at number 10. Miami at number 9 didn't play. No real change there. Georgia, I got the win. No real change there either. Cincinnati, number 7 at 8-0. Actually, I think Georgia moved up because Northwestern dropped down. And then we have Florida at number 6. They are 7-1 overall. The argument's going to be this week, I think, whether or not Texas A&M and or Florida move ahead of Ohio State, because I think there is an argument for that. But again, we've seen the committee not penalize teams for not playing, so I don't think they're going to penalize Ohio State You look at Florida and A&M's wins; they weren't against great teams, so I don't think there's going to be enough for them to move ahead of the Buckeyes. So Texas A&M at number 5 at 6-1. I think Ohio State stays there at number 4. In the top 3, no change. Clemson number 3, Notre Dame number 2, Alabama number 1. The top 3, there's absolutely no reason for that to change at all. There's nothing any team did to pass Clemson. If Ohio State had played, a really good team and they beat them and were really impressive this week, then yeah, they would probably move ahead of Clemson, but they didn't even play. So I think the top 6 is going to stay the same, really. Top 7 if you count Cincinnati in there. Cincinnati's resume took a little bit of a hit because SMU lost their second game. That was something that I think Cincinnati was banking on SMU being a top 25 team. They are not. Tulsa, if Cincinnati beats Tulsa, Tulsa may fall out of the top 25, and then there's no top 25 wins for the Bearcats. So it's going to be tough, I think, for Cincinnati to make the college football playoff. Definitely going to need some help. But again, we see no real change. This is my projection for what the committee is going to do. This is not my personal opinion. This is simply what I think the committee is going to do based off of what they've done in the past and obviously what they did last week. And then, of course, what happened on the field this past weekend. So those are my thoughts, my projections for the new top 25. I will, of course, have a reaction to the new rankings coming up tomorrow night. Watch for that video. Thank you for watching this video. And, of course, give me your comments, your thoughts. How do you think the committee is going to rank these teams? Leave those down below. Again, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.